Thank you for starting your week with us. Hello and welcome to Business Daily. I'm Ijun in Seoul. Let's get started with a look at today's highlights. US President Donald Trump says he will push for a more reciprocal fair trade with Japan on the second day of his 12-day Asian trip. Massive leak of secret documents known as the Paradise Papers reveal how the world's biggest businesses and elite have been sheltering their wealth in tax havens. These stories and more coming right up. U.S. President Donald Trump's five-nation tour of Asia has gotten underway in Tokyo, where he discussed trade issues with Japan. Giving a speech to Japanese business leaders on Monday, Trump said the U.S. has suffered from, quote, massive trade deficits with Japan, and that he hopes to turn that around. Trump will be arriving here in Korea on Tuesday morning for the second leg of his tour, where he's likely to bring up the same issue with Seoul. The Trump administration has demanded a renegotiation of the Korea-US FTA, citing an imbalance in trade. Seoul has confirmed the two countries have entered into talks and are considering all possibilities. With Korean exports posting strong growth so far this year, the country's outbound shipments could swell by a further 12 to 13% in the fourth quarter. This is according to the Export-Import Bank of Korea, which also reported a 7.4% rise in its leading export indicator for Q4. Total exports are expected to reach $580 billion by year-end, 17% higher on-year, thanks to a strong second-half performance. In a survey of exporting firms, nearly half of the respondents identified low-cost competition from developing countries as their biggest threat. Despite growing exports, their recent struggles in China have led some companies to seek out other markets to provide consistent revenue. And now for our coverage of the markets, we have our markets contributor Lee Ji-hye on the line with us. Hello, Ji-hye.
Hello, Jian.
All right, so tell us how the local stocks performed on the first trading day of the week.
Sure, June. Stocks traded mixed today with the benchmark Kospi closing 0.33% lower at 2,549.41, and the tech-heavy Kosdaq closing 0.38% higher to close at 703.79. Market bellwether Samsung Electronics was flat, and SK Hynix moved down 1.07%. Hyundai Motors fell 1.86%, and leading chemicals firm LG Chem also declined 1.21%, while SK Innovation climbed 1.44%. LG Household and Healthcare rose 2.7%, as well as Amore Pacific, which was up 0.78%. And by sectors, game and software services were up by more than 4%, followed by tobacco and airlines, while shipping companies, venture capitals, and wireless communication services were on the decline.
Now, tell us about some of the major market events to look forward to this week.
Sure, June. For Tuesday, Gallup will be releasing an economic confidence index on how Americans view their economy. The latest monthly survey showed a level 4 for October, while the most recently weekly showed, which is considered rather a steady level. Moving on to Wednesday, it's a bank reserve settlement date, which will be the first since U.S. President Donald Trump nominated Jerome H. Powell to be the next chair of the Fed come next February. As for Thursday, U.S. wholesale figures will be released for the month of September. Wholesale trade inventories are expected to rise 0.3%, which is right in line with September's advanced reading. Wholesalers have been building their inventories aggressively with 0.9% and 0.6% builds in the prior two reports. Manufacturing and wholesale trade have also seen a deceleration in wage growth this year in terms of the labor market, despite recent gains in employment. As for Friday, the U.S. Treasury Department will be releasing its monthly account of the federal government budget. This comes after the Treasury ended fiscal 2017 with a $665.7 billion deficit and a 13.7% increase from fiscal 2016.
And now back to the local front. What are some main events besides U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to the peninsula this week?
Well, Jiyoon, there's lots of happenings on the domestic front besides the summit meeting between Presidents Moon Jae-in and Donald Trump. The Korea Development Institute will be releasing its November economic trends report on Tuesday after stating that a rather prolonged economic recovery is underway despite optimism from exports. As for Wednesday, the Bank of Korea will release a report on financial market trends for the month of October, with the spotlight on the impact of Korea's new mortgage rules for owners of multiple homes to be put into place starting next year in 2018. Lastly, for Friday, South Korea's finance ministry announces trends for foreign investment in the third quarter. For Q3, some $8.47 billion has gone into direct overseas investment, marking a 3.2% drop in dollar terms year on year. This has been Lee Ji-hye for Business Daily.
Despite growing concerns over lackluster iPhone sales, Apple has posted strong earnings in the fiscal fourth quarter. Our Elliot Kim has the details.
Friday mornings worldwide marked the launch of Apple's iPhone X as lines stretched down sidewalks and inventories quickly ran out. Despite analysts' concerns ranging from the high price tag of over $1,000 in the US to supply chain issues for the new facial recognition unit, the launch of the 10th anniversary device couldn't have gone better. Early excitement of an upgrade supercycle had tempered prior to launch, but consumer sentiment doesn't seem to have wavered.
I'm super excited because I've used my phone for more than 2 years. I was disappointed with the iPhone 7 and 6s. There wasn't much of an update. But I really like the iPhone X, so I set my alarm, got up early, and came to line up. I'm very happy.
The popularity has Apple poised for exceptionally strong holiday sales since the launch of the flagship iPhone usually occurs during Q4. And despite the flagship going on sale later than expected, the company beat nearly every expectation for Q4, with the Apple shares closing at $172.50 on Friday, a record high. Revenue came in at $52.6 billion, up 12% on year and surpassing the $50.7 billion predicted by Reuters. Net profits hit $10.7 billion, up 19% on year. The iPhones 8 and 8 Plus unexpectedly became Apple's top 2 selling products instantly, despite rampant reports of low consumer interest and production of the devices being halved, even surprising CEO Tim Cook during the conference call. Other device sales also rose. iPads were up 11% on year, and MacBook Pro sales rose 10%. Services like Apple Music and iCloud continued to bolster revenues with strong double-digit growth. But none of those were Apple's fastest grower. The company's other product category, which includes items like the Apple Watch and Apple TV, led with 36% growth. Despite what's normally a slow quarter for the company leading up to the holiday period, Apple is surely happy with these results and the strong launch of its flagship, heading into what could be record-setting numbers for the company. Elliot Kim, Business Daily.
Employees at Samsung Wells Story, a food catering affiliate of Samsung Group, have created a new labor union comprised of 50 workers. According to the Federation of Korean Trade Unions on Monday, the union is planning to expand its membership to 100 workers by year end and to 1,000 by the end of next year. It also plans to urge Samsung Wells Story to improve management transparency and working conditions. Samsung has a no union policy, and while a few of its affiliates are registered to umbrella union groups, the conglomerate has never allowed an in-house labor union. The Financial Services Commission says 16% of all young Koreans have taken out a loan at least once in their lives, with the delinquency rate seen at 11% among young borrowers. Korea's financial watchdog added that nearly 1 out of 3 of delinquent borrowers have been blacklisted by financial institutions due to their poor credit ratings. The latest report is fueling concerns over Korea's mounting household debt burden, pressuring the government to take further action. In response, the Commission said it's expanding its low-interest loan program for young Koreans and will introduce a more flexible repayment structure. And Korea's jobless rate could move higher, with more young Koreans giving up job opportunities in the private sector to prepare for civil servant exams. Also, the stark difference in pay between private and public firms is further motivating young people to work for the government instead. Our Lee Ju-young has more.
There may be a reason why nearly half of Korea's job seekers are preparing to become civil servants. Apart from reasons like higher job security, the difference in accumulated wages that civil servants and workers at private companies rack up over their careers is extreme. According to the Korea Economic Research Institute, the average government employee made at least $698,000 more than a worker at a private firm with less than 50 people. The gap was smaller compared to employees who work at relatively larger firms, but there was still a difference of roughly $436,000. Even workers employed at large corporations made significantly less than a public official over their lifetime, from start to retirement. The Research Institute says this is because not only does their annual pay increase at a faster rate than those who work at large corporations, but civil servants also retire at a relatively later age of about 59.
The pool of skilled people that private firms can hire is decreasing. This is, in turn, adversely affecting companies that need to perform a lot of creative activities.
As the country sees a significant increase in the number of people who spend years preparing for civil servant exams, experts say the government needs to overhaul their systems of compensation and allocation of human capital. Lee Ju-young, Business Daily.
The National Assembly is starting its preliminary examination of the government's budget proposal for next year. The Assembly's Special Committee on Budget and Accounts will hold a general meeting today and tomorrow to look through the government's $384 billion budget bill submission, which requests a 7.1% rise in spending compared to last year. President Moon has said this rise in expenditure is needed to create more jobs, particularly for young adults. But opposition parties will closely examine the bill and try to weed out what they see as populist elements in the proposal. The final decision on the bill is scheduled for December 2nd. The Moon Jae-in administration has unveiled its first unilateral sanctions against North Korea over the regime's nuclear and missile provocations. A foreign ministry official said Monday that 18 individuals representing North Korean banks overseas have been blacklisted for supplying funds to the regime's weapons programs. The list includes the heads and executives of North Korean banks stationed across the world, including in China, Russia, and Libya. The sanctions will freeze the assets of targeted individuals within South Korean jurisdiction and ban their transactions with South Korean banks. So a slew of sanctions on North Korea recently adopted by the international community may be taking a heavy toll on the country's economy. It has also prompted Kim Jong-un to reaffirm his message of self-reliance as he toured a number of factories around the north. Our Yoo Jun-hee reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has seemingly shifted his focus back on the economy, carrying out inspections of the country's manufacturing facilities. It's a notable change in Kim's routine, whose public appearances were mostly reserved for military drills and parades in recent months. Pyongyang state media showed the leader touring a vehicle assembly line just 10 days after he was seen visiting a cosmetics factory.
Our leader was happy that these large trucks are being manufactured with the technology and skill of our own workforce.
The key message of Kim's visits was that of economic self-reliance and homegrown production of manufactured goods. The regime could be feeling the heat as mounting international sanctions continue to loom heavy over the country's economic outlook. South Korea's National Intelligence Service says North Korea's economy may be on the brink of disaster, on a scale not seen since its economic crisis and famine in the 1990s. It estimates North Korea's GDP, which grew 3.9% last year, could post a negative growth rate as high as 5% next year if sanctions are properly implemented. Although Pyongyang has given no indication of giving up its weapons program anytime soon, experts believe it may show some signs of cooperation, at least on the surface level, to ease sanctions pressure on the regime. Yoo Jun-hee, Business Daily.
Prominent global figures are now under scrutiny following the leak of the so-called Paradise Papers, lifting the lid on extensive offshore dealings. Now, similar leaks in the past have led to hundreds of political figures being driven out of office, and this latest revelation is threatening to do the same. Our Lee Jung-yeon tells us more.
A trove of leaked documents has left some of the biggest names in politics, entertainment, and sport feeling a tad uncomfortable. The project called Paradise Papers exposes sheltered wealth hidden in offshore accounts to avoid paying tax. The material comes from some 13 million files, the majority of which come from offshore law firm Appleby. They were obtained by German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung and shared by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists. The Guardian, BBC, and New York Times are among some 100 media groups jointly investigating the papers. The top names so far on the shared list of more than 130 million include the Queen of England. Her private estate invested some £10 million offshore in the Cayman Islands. US President Donald Trump's cabinet members, donors, and advisors are shown to have extensive offshore dealings in a firm that's linked to Russian President Vladimir Putin's son-in-law. The key money man of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is also linked to offshore schemes in a tax-avoiding trust. Some other household names include multinational corporations, including Nike and Apple. These Paradise Papers, coming in at 1.4 terabytes, are second on the list of such exposures in terms of size, coming after the Panama Papers leaked last year. Such disclosures have led to hundreds of investigations worldwide, forcing politicians and even prime ministers out of office in the past. The most recent leak applies pressure on world leaders, including Donald Trump, Justin Trudeau, and Theresa May, who have all pledged to crack down on tax evasion schemes. Lee Jung-yeon, Business Daily.
One of the biggest environmental gatherings since the Paris Accords begins today in Germany. Now, ahead of the meeting, there's already criticism of all things on the location of the UN conference. Our Eunice Kim explains.
It's one of the largest lignite coal mines in Europe. The cluster of 3 surface mines owned by energy giant RWE churns out some 100 million tons of brown coal with a carbon content of up to 70%. Just 50 kilometers west is Bonn, the German city hosting the 23rd Conference of the Parties to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, also known as COP23. As environment ministers from around the world discuss the next steps of the Paris Climate Agreement over the next 2 weeks, activists are attracting attention to Germany's dirty brown coal mines.
It's a powerful symbol that the World Climate Conference is taking place just 50 kilometers away from the #1 CO2 source in Europe.
With Germany having phased out nuclear power, its reliance on coal is still sizable. 40% of the state's power comes from dirty coal versus Europe's average of 25%. RWE is licensed to extract 1.3 billion tons of lignite through 2045. Activist Dirk Jansen says the mines emit 82 million tons of CO2 annually into the air and must be stopped immediately.
We have to leave the brown coal industry as soon as possible. We have to decarbonize our general energy industry and all industry and carry it away from fossil fuel energy.
At the edge of the Hambach surface mine is an old forest, at risk of being razed down to make more room for coal digging. Inside, a community of squatters reside, some for years, in tree houses equipped with makeshift kitchens and solar power.
This is a very old forest and the last of its kind in all of Europe. And when all the world media leaves, comes a court appointment where it's decided that the trees will be taken down, which is quite clear for us already because there is too much money involved in the game.
Germany has spent well over 20 billion euros per year to boost its green energy sector. But still, its reliance on coal was only cut by 10% from levels in 2000 to 40%. The dual reality is playing out in Germany as the country hosts a major climate gathering which will aim to end the use of fossil fuels within this century. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
And that does it for today. Thanks for watching. We'll be back tomorrow with more at the same time, same place for your Business Daily. Until then, goodbye.